My father was born in Eastern Europe, and he suffered from a disease called Berger's disease, which is a circulatory disease. And he had an amputated leg at the knee, so he had what was then an artificial leg, a very basic type of thing. And he was not to live very long, so he died early.
My father named me Rosamond, and I've loved it all my life. And I was born in Marlborough, Massachusetts, in Marlborough Hospital, although we lived in a near town, Hudson, Massachusetts.
I know very little of my father's family. He emigrated to the United States probably in the late 1800s. He came from Lodz, Poland, and that's all really that I know. I had one sister. She was born in 1927, so she was maybe 3 years younger than I. And so my mother had me and my sister to take care of.
I had an older brother, 2 years old at the time, and my sister Mary Claire came 5 years later. My dad taught in a high school in Hudson and also coached, I think, every team, because even I became involved in the sports, in that I've always been interested in following the sport.
I always considered myself middle class, although we were poorer than church mice. We did very little until when I was 13. When my father died, I guess my uncles began to take care of me. 2 of them were physicians, and one ran a plumbing contractor's business.
I remember going to Packard Street School, walked there, although it was through the woods. And I sometimes think nowadays, no one would have allowed children to walk through those woods the way we walked to school. It was the Depression, and I know things were tight, but we were in a very nice housing section.
Toward the end of the late 1930s, business was beginning to pick up. You must remember the 30s was the years of the Depression, where young men were out of work for years at a time. But by the end of the 30s, because of the war in Europe, why the factories of the United States began to pick up. And so we would be working in those years 7 days a week in the summer when I was doing this. And so I made, I remember, maybe $80 a week working, let's see, 50 or 60 hours a week.
But my dad was trying to get a better position. So when I was in 9th grade, we moved to Adams, Massachusetts, which is up in the Berkshire Hills near Mount Greylock. And I remember fussing. I didn't want to move. And but when I got there, I was delighted. It was up in the mountains, lots of skiing, lots of snow too. And I don't remember. I remember going the first time to the 6th grade there, but I don't remember having any difficulty getting used to Adams. We had friends fine. So Pop was principal of the high school there.
The war came in December 7th, 1941. The draft was in effect. We had absolutely nothing in the United States at that time. In February 1941, I went down into the city of Providence to the Naval Recruiting Office and enlisted in the Navy. I did that because I didn't want to go in the Army. And so the recruiting officer asked me what I was doing. I told him I was a student at Brown, that I had just started. And he said, well, we got this program called the V-12 program, and that's what you're going to do. So they had no organization, no nothing. So they put me back in school, and it was not until July 1st, 1943, that I went into the Navy at Brown, and they had no place to put me, so I still was in uniform but going to school.
And then when the war came, there was, although my mom had taught French and English before, they really needed her because the schools didn't have enough teachers. They were gone in the war. And so then Mom taught at the high school too. So after I graduated, I never even considered anything but Smith College because that's what I heard about from my mom. And so I don't even remember worrying about applying. I just assumed. And but my sister went to Smith too 5 years later. My brother went off to the Air Force. So while he was gone, then I went to Smith, which was all girls, but there weren't any boys around anyway. And I happened to major in bacteriology. It was a mixed major. And a wonderful professor, Eleanor Smith.
And then I went to what they called a midshipman school at Columbia in New York. And for 3 months, they taught me how to do nothing really. They taught me how to navigate, how to do celestial navigation, how to do some type of communications. And he went in 3 months. In August of 1944, I was commissioned at the age of 20 to be an ensign in the Navy. And they took me from there to a place called Solomon Island, Maryland, which was an amphibious training base. And they taught me some basic communications, how to do codes and this and that, and for maybe 6 weeks. And in September of 1944, they assigned me to a landing craft infantry, which is a picture over there. So I went on this ship. We played around for 2 or 3 weeks in the Chesapeake Bay, and then started out first to Key West, Florida, to Panama, through the Panama Canal. And in the Panama Canal, they gave us the basic plan to invade Iwo Jima. on the 18th of February 1945, we showed up at Iwo Jima, and we did not know what to expect. Nobody told us anything. And when we came in at early dawn, we could see several of the old battleships that had been sunk in Pearl Harbor. And it was a sight to see. Iwo Jima was a very small island. You could see one end to the other. The left to our port was Mount Suribachi, which is the mountain in which that famous picture was taken of the Marines raising our flag. And it so happened that one morning I turned around and I saw this little fluttering flag. Must have been maybe on the 22nd, 3 or 4 days after we landed, and I could see that. And I couldn't imagine how those Marines got up there in 4 days. But we lasted there maybe 10 days, and we had to leave, and we left to go to Leyte Gulf. And there we were supposed to get ready to go up for the invasion of Okinawa. So we stayed there maybe 10 days. Roosevelt died during those 10 days. I remember Tokyo Rose saying that our great leader was gone and we were going to lose the war. In any event, we took Okinawa, we left and went for, I guess they didn't have anything else to do with us, so they sent us to a place called Ulithi. Then we left for the Philippines to Manila on the Subic Bay, and we were in Subic Bay in August of 1945 when the atomic bombs were dropped at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was the end of the war. And I got home, I guess, sometime in February of 1946.
My first cousin, who had just graduated from Vassar, was looking for a job in Boston. So we found a place to live together.
If I can go back to 1947, I was in the laboratory at Dr. Stewart's in 1947. And in September of 1947, 2 girls came down from Smith College. And one of them looked rather good to me, who turned out to be your grandmother or your mother. And so she had an admirer at the time, but by January 1948, he was a thing of the past. And that started everything.
Miss Smith said she had a professor at Brown, Doc Stewart, and she thought we should go to graduate school, Dottie and I. And so we applied to get fellowships where the university paid you and you assisted in the labs. And that's what we did. We went off to Brown in September of 47. We graduated in 47. And we went into Arnold Laboratory, and I do remember there were 2 tall fellas, the Feinberg brothers, and then there was a shorter fellow in a navy jacket, and he was running around, and Doc Stewart, and there was somebody else in the lab. Gene Kennedy was in the adjoining lab. He later became head of the department at Catholic University, Gene Kennedy. And so that's where I met Sam.
I was right away. I had this fellow. I still talk about him. That he was after her, and I remember he came down on the Halloween of 1947, and I didn't like that one bit. And she went up to New Hampshire the 15th of November of 1947. I didn't like that. And she spent New Year's Eve with him of 1948, and I didn't like that. And that was the last time she saw him. That made me happy.
And so Sam graduated and got a job in Washington. But anyway, 6 months before that, we did get married. And after, what is it, about 4 years, we were thinking about it. So in the spring, Sam graduated, and he came down to Washington, so I came with him, of course.
When we moved to Boston and I started graduate school, Roz was working, had a job at the Mass Antitoxin Lab, and I had a room with 3 other fellas at a Boston University dormitory, right? And Roz and her cousin,
Lou
Clark, had an apartment at the backside of Beacon Hill.
That's the
right
first
near
time.
where the burlesque theaters used to be.
The old Howard, wasn't it?
That's right, the old Howard. And they lived there for a few months, I guess, but eventually moved across the street from the Art Museum in Boston on Huntington Avenue, where they had a really a one-room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom apartment. And that went on until we got married, which was in October of 1951. And by that time, I had really finished all my requirements for a degree, but I had no job and no prospects. And I moved into the apartment.
I had a job, though.
Yeah, but yeah, Rosamond was supporting me. I had the GI Bill. But Lou moved out and I moved in. And
But I know he gave me, I do remember, we were at Vanderbilt Hall, which is the dorm I mentioned that my brother was in at Harvard Medical School. And they were having a dance, so he asked me and Sam to come over for the dance. And we were there, and that's when Sam gave me a ring. Yeah, so then I knew we were engaged. But I wasn't surprised.
by that time, early in 1952, we had a child coming on the way. And we came from Washington to Boston to get my degree. Boston wouldn't mail it to me. You had to show up and go through it. And then we came back to Washington, and Roz went up to Adams, where her home was, and to take part in her brother's wedding, and we lost that child, and that was hard on both of us. And I went up to take Roz home, and we started our life really here. And Chris came in December of 1953, and he didn't like the apartment. He never slept for one night in that apartment. And sooner or later, after a year or so, in 1955, we had saved enough money to make a down payment on a house in Kensington. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it was a little house.
On a good, wonderful court. A wonderful, with all the neighbors were like us, veterans back and young families. And some of the people are still friends of ours. A lot of them are gone, unfortunately.
Well, in any event, we moved into this place in 1955. And David was on the way. And in June of 1955, David arrived. And we had this house, and I might mention that the minute Chris moved into that house, he slept every night for whatever.
So Sam claims.
Well, that's the truth. In 1954, this fellow, Dr. Edsel, who was my boss and was taking care of me all this time, decided that I needed to go into the field and do some work. So he sent me to Japan for the summer of 1954, I guess it was. So I spent the summer in Japan. At that time, Chris, our oldest son, was only 6 months old. So I took off and left Rosamond alone with this 6-month-old child, and went and spent the summer working at the Komagomi Infectious Disease Hospital in Tokyo. The next year, 1955, our second son, David, was born in June, so Chris was a year and a half old, and David was 2 weeks old. I took off and spent the summer working at the Children's Hospital in Mexico City. So Roz was left alone doing that. And I never said anything one way or another, except many years later I asked her what she thought about this. Oh, it was nothing, it was my job, she said, not a whimper.
Sam was busy. He did a lot of traveling. He and his colleagues, they were always moaning. It was such a burden to go off on these trips, but I could always tell when Sam was about to go. He never said, but he was kind of putting stuff in the suitcase. And he was glad to be taking those trips. And then the first thing I'd hear, he was waiting to come home.
So over the years, Roz took care of the children, and I worked, and when they got through school, every place I went, I tried to take Roz with me. She's been over most of the world, in the Pacific. Let's see, she went to Australia, New Zealand. We spent 2 weeks traveling around while I was giving talks in China. She was in England's 2 or 3 times, and Ireland when I was talking. She been to Denmark, to England 3 or 4 times, to Ireland, to Switzerland 3 or 4 times.
I went on one trip to England when they were having a special dinner for him, so that was special. The most impressive was 2 weeks in China. He was the guest of the government. And I remember sitting in a hall, they were introducing him, and I was writing postcards because what was I going to listen to? And I'm writing a postcard, and the man is saying, "This is Dr. Formal. He's known as the father of Shigella research." And I'm writing a thing, what? I didn't know he was the father of Shigella research, but anyway.
So then we had a chance, obviously, in later years to travel wherever. And I would be at work while we traveled, and Roz would take off.
It's true.
And she didn't have to worry about driving the Mercury or any place, but she went on glaciers in Switzerland, and we had a wonderful trip in Ireland, which was a favorite place I like to go. And it's wonderful green country, people, very nice. We always liked the pubs. Although we didn't like the beer, it was too heavy.
Well, I do remember it was light beer was Harp beer, because that's the kind I would get, was Harp light beer.
We had enough money, and we moved a few blocks away to Woodson Avenue. And in that time, I forget when that was, in 1959. We moved
right.
to Woodson Avenue.
It was a week.
That was
month
just before Jimmy
Jim
came.
was born.
Until Jimmy came.
September. I'm sorry.
And there the house was a little larger, had a dining room, and Rod, on a few hours' notice, could cook up a dinner for the people from Japan or from Sweden or from France or from any other place that happened to come by to visit. And Jimmy came in September of 1959, and we lived very happily until maybe 11 years ago when we moved here. We built the house in Bethany in
70.
Around 70 it was finished. I remember we were in the house, it was halfway finished inside when they landed on the moon.
69, that was. I don't remember how much discussion of dogs there was, but David, the middle boy, he wanted a dog. And first he wanted a bulldog, believe it or not. And he even wrote somebody, didn't he?
Yes, he
so
did.
He
wrote
he
somebody.
was 12, 10 or 12, I'm not sure. And I think the bulldog would have been $300 or something. He found out, which is ridiculous, or was at the time. But he's a middle child, and he never asked for anything. The others might ask for toys, or David never asked for anything. So finally we thought he ought to have a dog. And I don't know, I saw an ad in the paper, I guess, and we went down off of Connecticut Avenue. There was a family, I think military family, and they had a Welsh Terrier that had pups. And we didn't know anything about a Welsh Terrier. They had the pups in the kitchen, I remember. And so we went back when the pup was old enough and bought the Welsh Terrier. And the boys named him Skipper, and he was a treasured dog. And he lived 17 years when he was really too feeble. But he was a wonderful dog.
And the boys,
Except he didn't do it. He didn't do what he was told, but
no, they think, I think they still remember him.
oh, they do. And I often thought, I don't know anything about raising pups. Skip was very unusual in that he never was eager for food. He put his dish down and he kind of walked around it and sniffed at it. And then he'd come back and eat. And I always wondered, maybe that had something to do with they were puppies in the kitchen or of this house, and he must never had to fight for food or something. It's very casual. One time Chris brought a dachshund home from Haverford. He was at college then. He found it on the railroad tracks, and he had seen it apparently. Oh, he took it apparently back to the rooms and had it for a while and couldn't find anybody who wanted it, and he brought it home. And it was fine, except it had been neglected and starving, and we couldn't keep it from eating Skipper's food all the time. Finally, one of Sam's colleagues adopted it, and I think they kept that dog for the rest of his life.
That's
remember?
right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sam was wonderful. I've often wondered how he knew how to fix things. Other than, of course, he was an apprentice plumber, so he's always called for the bathroom problems. But everything else he could fix, even though he didn't have a father to show him. You know, the father died so young, but he just did. And that's what precipitated coming here, really. We came home from the beach one weekend, and the bathroom upstairs had leaked, and the water was all down and all ruined that bedroom and everything in the closet. And Sam at that point said, I can't do it anymore, which is when we started looking at Riderwood. His mother used to say, Sammy was always handy, and that's for sure. And I don't know how I don't know, you had all this equipment in the basement, how he knew how to use it, I don't know. He made this table. He made that chest be on the other side. And he had all these frames in the house that he's made, and clocks, and a lot of things, lovely furniture in the cottage. In fact, he he was learning for a lot of our things, but he mastered it for that furniture in the cottage. It's really lovely. And I remember that because the year before we'd been at the beach at Bethany, and we went around and looked at a little land and finally saw the big storm. There'd been a big storm, must have been 68, had wrecked a lot of cottages and so on. So land was less expensive, and we bought a lot and a half actually. And then next year Sam had some outfit, I don't know how he knew, build a shell. So from then on in the summer, Sam and the boys were down there. They did all the insides. As I say, I don't know how Sam knew to do that. I would have to have my instruction sheet and so on, but he just knew. And the boys put in insulation, and Chris and David they had to go down. Jimmy was too young, so he got off. He got off to stay home. But the older boys, they worked a lot in the cottage.
We built that. The children, Chris and David, and I finished the inside of the cottage. We did it with knotty pine, so we didn't have to do anything with plastering or anything.
And so since then, everybody's enjoyed it, the whole family. I get up and many times say, "Thank you, Lord." You know, we made it, that we can get up. That we get up. I had my knee done just a year ago. And my knee, it bends now, it's good. We're lucky, at our age, we're lucky we can get out of bed, really.
I just wish my children and grandchildren, I hope that they'll be happy, that's all, and satisfied. And they can look at their grandmother and their grandfather to see two satisfied people.
But for the children, I wish good health and being able to work, but finding something to do is really important, you know. Not that it has to be an important job, but something that fulfills you.
Have a good wife. That's the whole thing. It was Rosamond who did everything.
Oh, no.
And she was the one I depended upon.
And I depended upon you.
And
So
I know wherever I'd be, that she would take care of things, and she did. And really, everything. I was right in the very beginning, and it lasted. And there's no question about it. I didn't make a poor choice. And I think everything that we have done is due to her.
And that's not true.
And that was it.
My advice for young people is, I think, be a little bit older before you get married. Because we were lucky, we were in the lab together so many hours, day after day, that if he were nasty, it would have shown up sometime, right? And we spent more time in the lab, more hours than we would have if we were married. You know, that was grad school. We were there the whole time. So if we didn't get along, we would have found out then, I guess. Right?
Oh, who wouldn't get along with you?
Oh, oh, please. Please.
In any event, I've been very fortunate. So
By the time of graduation, I think Doc Stewart would have been very unhappy if we didn't get together later on.
yes,
He had put that together.
we have 7 grandchildren, and all of them are wonderful. And I worry about their future, that's all. There's nothing much we can do one way or another, but it's a tough world out there. And I just hope that they're going to survive all right. They got good mothers and fathers, and I assume that they'll do well.
They're wonderful. Well, family's important to us, and Sam and I were both so fortunate as children with our families. You know, they certainly tended to us and cared for us and pushed us to learn. Right. Had to go to school.
And that's what's
Right.
it.
Yeah. And kindness, even though at least our family, aunts and so on, weren't right around us, as you know, is noticed in small towns. Everyone knew everybody's cousin in school, I remember. But we didn't know our cousins much. They weren't anywhere near us. But still, whenever we saw the aunts and uncles, they certainly treated us kindly and well. So we're just fortunate. So hope for the best for the grandchildren, great-grand. Now we have one great-granddaughter. And so that's a whole new cycle. I don't know. I'd love to wish the great-grandchildren, or give them a formula for happiness and success, but I don't know what it is.
There's nothing I can give them anymore. But, I'd like to see them develop. I like to see, like Joanne has a daughter who I try to keep telling to go work on somebody and do what I did. She's studying geology. How she ever got into something like that, I don't know, but good for her.
For the kids?
Anybody my age who grew up, he could never forget Franklin Roosevelt. That's my favorite person. Now, Brosman, I'm her favorite person.